Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oladele Ayorinde. You are welcome to the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series today. As usual, it's, uh, it's a unique day, and as you can see, it's going to be uh, a unique one and a different, touch, as promised last week. So today, we are opening another layer to some of the conversations we've been having in the last few months. But before that, I'd like to welcome some of our, new friends, old friends, and some who are joining us for the first time today. Yeah, for the new friends who are joining us, this is Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. This is a space, a free space, for scholarly engagement, artistic research, and professional, engagement in music. Yeah, we also have different layers within this Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. One of them is what we call the Organ House Documentation and Digitization Project, which also has different, layer, artistic component, research component, as well as what we call the public-facing component. I don't know if you have seen our publicity online, I mean social media. We have a dedicated YouTube page where you can follow our agendas, our project, and initiatives. So let me not bore you with all that. In the process of this seminar today and conversation, I am also going to share the link and some of the updates regarding our projects with you. But for now, I'd like to tune in again back into today's project. I can tell you, and I'm happy, to welcome our guest today, Dr. Miracle Amah. Dr. Amah, how are you today? It's nice seeing you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. I'm doing okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So now, this is the structure we are going to use today, at least to help everyone follow and follow the steps into this conversation. We are going to have a conversation with Dr. Miracle Amah, and following that, we are going to have what we call Q&A session where our colleagues online can ask questions, follow-up questions, or there are things they want to ask, perhaps in terms of the focus of today. They need help, they need clarification, or they need further follow-up. You'll have the time, and the opportunity to ask directly, or any issues regarding the program here, the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. Yeah. So, Dr. Amah, let's get to the business today. So, again, it's just a dialogue to discuss, yeah, but feel free to, explore in many ways, as planned for today. So the first thing I would like to do perhaps is to ask you just to tell us a bit about yourself in terms of basic introduction or things you really want us to know about you for now.
Oh, okay. So like an introduction.
Definitely, definitely.
Okay. Um, my name is Miracle Amah. Some of you guys may know me as Miracle Ogbor. That was my maiden name. Um, well, I'm from Nigeria. I'm very bad at introductions. Um, I studied music. I started studying music in Nigeria. And I actually started with Mountaintop. I started with Mountaintop Conservatory of Music, and I was there for 2 years. And then later I went to Muson to do another diploma for another 2 years. While I was doing all of this, I was taking advantage of the opportunities that Dr. Lukai had opened for us in church back then, which included international exams. So at the time, I was my first year in Moson. I actually took a licentiate in vocal performance, and I passed. Um, so at the time I was living Muson, I was living with two associate degrees and a licentiate from the Royal School of Music, which was what helped me gain admission here to do a master's degree, which I didn't think I was qualified for. I remember I had that conversation with Dr. Luca and I was like, if they are giving you admission, go for it. Um, so that was how I came here, did my master's at London School of Music, Bard College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Um, I was there for 2 years, from 2017 to 2019. And then immediately after that, I decided to go for my doctoral degree at James Madison University, which I don't know how it happened, but I finished it in 3 years um, at James Madison. And right after that, I accepted the position of an assistant professor of music at Bradley University, which moved me to Illinois. And now I'm at Illinois Central College in vocal performance and some voice courses.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Yes, from your introduction, I think let's take it from there. I can see how you've traveled from different navigating different intersections and trajectory in your career. So I think let's start from a basic question like what really motivates you, motivated your entry into music? Why? Why not
It was
computers?
church,
Why not
really.
other things? Yeah.
I don't know why the sound is echoing. But it was really church that motivated that interest. Anybody who knows Mountain of Fire will know that um, MFM is a music church. And Dr. Lukaya invests a lot into music. And like I said, I started from Mountaintop Conservatory of Music. So it was church. I remember one of the first concerts. I was always in a branch before I moved to the headquarters. And I remember one of the first concerts that I attended was a DKO concert with different singers, instruments, and you know how DKO concerts always go. It's phenomenal. It's always beautiful. And I think it was from there that I was like, you know what? I want to play the violin. So I actually started out as a violinist. And I played violin for about 5 years before I started singing. And then I just continued singing from there. But it was really church that um, kind of, will I say, awoke that musical gift in me. And I just followed it from there. And MFM had a lot of ways that you could build yourself musically. If you wanted to go the contemporary route, you could with different choirs. And if you wanted to go the classical route, you could too. And yeah, I just did a little bit of everything. And here we are.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, that also, uh, dovetail into the next question, which is more of a comparative, comparison between different region, different layers, and different experiences that you've had in the last, let's say at least in the last 10 or 15 years. Now, how will you describe your education and early career trajectory in Nigeria? I mean, in comparison to what you have in the US or professional experiences, or education in the US. How
That's
will
a
you
really
place
good
them?
question. Yeah, I think for me, everything, you know, and I believe in God, everything works together for good. Um, like I said, I started from church and when I was in a branch, I actually used to play the keyboard for my church, little
Wow.
chords here and there. And then sometimes I'll sing praise and worship. So I actually started out as more contemporary based, and I'll lead praise and worship, and I'll be invited to different regions to sing. And that was where I started from. And then after that, I started learning the violin, even when I was in my branch. And I was going to the headquarters weekly to play the violin, and then I joined DKO Junior Orchestra. I was playing there. Um, But yeah, all of those experiences kind of prepared me for, or will I say it increased my musical appetite to say, okay, I want to study this. Because prior to that, I actually wanted to study accounting.
Yeah.
Right from when I was young, I always said I wanted to be an accountant. And in high school, I was in the commercial class. So my trajectory before music really came in was to become a chartered accountant, to have all the money, you know. But I think it was right when I started senior secondary school was when I really delved deep into music. Because when I was in SS1 was when I took my first musical ABRSM exam, and that was grade three. And after that, I think 2 years later, I went straight to grade eight. So, and I passed both of them with distinction. So that kind of, I was excited that, oh, there's more to this thing, there's more to music. And that was what really kept me going. And then after that, I decided to study music. And I started with Mountaintop Conservatory of Music, went to Muson. And all of the things I learned from both schools was what helped me pass my LRSM exam, which till today it's still unfathomable. But that all of these experiences was what helped me pass my LRSM exam. And then right after I finished from Moson, I think it was a year after that I moved to the United States and continued my um I think one of the major difference that I would say between that and here was that back home in Nigeria we had we had this freedom, and I would tell people, please take that freedom. We had this freedom to collaborate with different people. Like it was more like a friendship. I think someone's unmuted that's causing the echo. It was more like a friendship, a collaboration between friends when I was back home. Like I remember back then, Shay would be in the practice room and I would just knock on the door. Hello, Shay, can you play Una Voce Pokova? I'm singing it in like 5 minutes, you know. And it was a culture shock for me when I moved here. And I couldn't do that. You had to register for a pianist, you had to find a pianist that will work with you. It was very contractual. You make 1 hour a week. I'm like, 1 hour a week? I used to practice with Shay like 5 hours a week. So all of that kind of changed that experience for me. And I had to realize, okay, you're in a different place, you're in a different situation right now. How do you maneuver the situation to still get the same results, if not even a better result than you had before? So that was the first thing that was a culture shock for me when I moved here, was that I didn't have all that freedom anymore. I didn't have that freedom to just play with my friends and just make music. It was very structured. So I had to learn structure, not just in practicing or in music, but also in performance, also in classes. Like I remember I was in class the first day and they gave us a syllabus. Sometimes in Nigeria, when a teacher gives you a syllabus, you're like, oh, okay, you need to just throw it somewhere in your bag. No, I threw it somewhere in my bag. And the next week, the professor was like, okay, so what's your assignment for next week? And I'm like, which assignment? I don't understand. And it was all written out in the syllabus. So it was a whole different ball game moving here, and I had to adjust to that. But moving forward, and then I moved on to get my doctorate in Virginia, which was also different too, because I had a timeline to write my dissertation, I had a timeline to do my performances, and I was working with the wonderful Dr. Ayorinde to write an opera at that time. So it was a lot of work. It was a lot of planning. It was a lot of I troubled that man. God bless him. I really troubled him. Every week I would be like, okay, we need to get this part by next week. Okay. So it's a lot of planning, it's a lot of dedication, it's a lot of perseverance too, because some people just won't let you have it. Um, and it's also a lot of dedication. So yeah, I think those were the major differences between back home and here for me.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I think you actually address my next point, but I'm still going to put it in a different way because it's very important for us to also see, how these experiences in terms of educational experiences in Nigeria, all the collaboration and the flexibility that it afforded you, and those and compare to the more like what we call the business, relationship in the States, But the question now for me is, let's talk about professional experiences, your professional experience in Nigeria and professional experience perhaps in the US, particularly now that you are in the market, in the field now. How do you, manage this in terms
The
of
differences.
connection? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think everywhere in the world, if there's one advice I'll give people is good character will take you further or farther in life than even your talent. And this I would say everywhere in music. So as much as you are um, building yourself musically, also build a good behavior, a good character. And I don't mean just, oh, attitude. I mean a good character musically too. Because people do not forget. That's one thing I've noticed. Is that you do a good job, they will come back for you. They'll give you references, they'll give you recommendations. You do a bad job, sorry, you're not coming back. Maybe it was a little bit freer in Nigeria, I would say, because we have friends. And like I said, in Nigeria, it was more of, oh, this is my friend. We've been working together for 10 years and we just made it work every time, right? We've been singing this particular repertoire for 10 years. So the person that will always get this job is Miracle, right? That's how we work back home. We work with people that we know. But it's the same thing. If you don't have a good character, both personally and professionally, you're not going to go very far. And that's what I've noticed in like my professional experience throughout, both in Nigeria. That's a commonality that we both have, both here and there. Now, speaking to the fact that being back home, it's a little more free, and here it's a little more structured, or let's say contractual almost.
Yeah.
That even adds to it. Is that here you can't show up late to a rehearsal. If you I remember one of my professors back in school, she said if you're on time, you're late. If you are late, you will never be called again. So if a rehearsal is at 2 p.m., you better be there at 1:45 or 1:50. Even 1:55, you're pushing it. Because at 1:55, people are already set on stage, ready to go at 2. So you have to be very professional. You have to be very um, timely with how you do things. It's not like back home where you be like, oh, we're running a little late. No, everything starts right on time. If the concert is at 7 p.m., you better be there at, if not 5:30, to get ready, get used to the stage, warm up, and do everything that you need to do before the concert because 7 is 7. At 7, you will hear the announcement. Everybody kindly sit down, please turn off your phones or put them on silent. And at 7:02, you're on stage. So those are experiences that I've noticed from both countries, let's say both worlds, um, is good character, timeliness, and also learning your music. The person that gets called back is the fastest person to learn the music. And I quickly learned that when we were doing a lot of operas, staging a lot of operas here and also back in Nigeria, is that we have that freedom where you're like, oh, can you help me learn my part? Here, you're on your own. You have to create time to sit down with the piano and learn your music. Nobody is going to play your part in the rehearsal. Just forget it. So all of the practices, all of your rehearsals have to be done privately, personally, if you need to hire a pianist by yourself to learn your music, that's on you. Nobody cares about your practice schedule. Because the thing about here too is that we have understudies, and most of these operas are double casted. So while you are there doing, sorry, my voice is really bad today because I've been coughing. Instantly, your opera director said, "Okay, second cast, please." Right in front of you, your role is being taken away from you. That's it. And they will not call you back. And they will definitely not give you a good recommendation for the next opera house. So you don't get that much levity here. You have to be ready. You have to be ready to go. I remember that there was a concert I did, I think late last year. It was a full production of Phantom of the Opera, but it was a movie. I think it was by Craig something. I've forgotten his last name now. Um, and it was with orchestra and and just soprano solo, no choir, no. It wasn't the regular Phantom of the Opera. It was the movie version of it. And I remember I only had one rehearsal with the orchestra, and that was on the day of the performance. Back home, we would have had like five rehearsals. In fact, if we were staging a full show, I'm sure back then when it was Mr. Joseph, would have been practicing every day for like last 2 weeks, right? With the orchestra, choir, zit probe, we really go heavy on the rehearsals. Here we don't. I had to learn the music on my own. The only rehearsal I had with the orchestra was 2 hours before the show. So prior to showing up, I had to know the orchestral part that I was ready. I had to know what I was anticipating to hear. And that's the hard part, is that you don't get to hear it twice. I remember that day I was like, oh my gosh, I entered wrongly here. And I was just like, oh, okay, okay. And the orchestra guy, the orchestra conductor was like, okay, do you want to run that one more time? Yes. And that was all I got before the show, which was 2 hours after that. So you have to be really, really professional. You have to be really ready to go, and you're not given multiple opportunities if you don't do well. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's in terms of technicalities, time management, business ethics, and professional ethics, I think there's a lot that goes into this process of performance and being a performer from what you have explained. But this is at the level of of an artist, artistic level or creative level and professional level. But there's another level that you embody, that we also need to talk about. And this is quite important, particularly for today's conversation. And that's your transformation or transition, or how you were able to manage different world. I mean, the world of performer, professional performing, then down to the world of research or what we call scholarship. Then I would like to know, can you tell us about your research?
Okay. So I would say the research part of my career actually started here in the US. Yes, back
Okay.
home we did some research here and there, homeworks. I remember Dr. Lusoji history. We had to write a research paper. So yeah, we did a little bit back home, but it really started here. When I started my master's degree, at the end of my degree, I had to write like a document, and that was also because I was planning to go for a doctoral degree. And one of the requirements for a doctoral degree here is to at least have one written scholarly paper. So our professors here had to prepare us for that, especially the people that wanted to go for a doctoral degree. I remember one of the first, I can't even remember the topic right now, but it talked about church music, and it talked about how do we embody the Holy Spirit in church music and not just sing as we should. And that was the paper I wrote. think it was about 30 pages long, and I submitted that for my doctoral degree. But the real research didn't really start until my doctoral degree.
Hmm.
Because that was where I had to publish things prior to even graduation. I had to have things out there. I had to it was during my doctoral degree that I published four short books. I co-wrote two books with some of my colleagues in school, and then at the end, I published a full dissertation. So that was where research was really rigorous for me. And I like the way you put it, that how do you balance out your performing, with research? One thing I'll say is it's not easy because especially for someone like me who loves to perform, I really do. I enjoy performance. But I had to slowly understand that I also enjoy the research part, and it's creating time and balance for um working it out. And I remember that time during my doctoral studies, like I said, my first few years, I was publishing some articles, publishing short books, little by little, like warming myself up for my dissertation. And then when it was time for dissertation, I was also my dissertation it included an opera which I wrote with Dr. Ayorinde. So it wasn't just a dissertation; it was also a performance. Um, so I think that was where the main divide happened because I had to create time to learn the music for the performance, and I also had to create time to write about the performance or write about the music that has been composed and create a solid case study for my research. So I remember back then, I would go to school in the morning, 8 a.m., do my rehearsals, everything, come back at 6 p.m., rest till 10 p.m., and I would write from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And this happened for 1.5 years.
Wow. Wow.
Exactly. So I had to. I'm not a coffee drinker. I still am not. But during that 1.5 year, I drank the most coffee I would ever drink in my entire life. And that was because I was not sleeping. I had to keep it going. So it's balancing that out, no matter how stressful or rigorous it is. Like I said, I really loved both parts of the experience, both the singing and the research. But even leaning more into the research, um, as I kept on writing, I really loved writing about African music, and I found I I had more joy writing about music than anything else. And I think it was because of the explorations that I kept on. Because when I started writing, I think one of the first things I wrote was about bel canto singing, and then I realized that 2 million gazillion writings about bel canto. So I had to start thinking where in the research field is lacking. And that was a conversation I had with one of my committee members in my dissertation committee. And she was like, where are we lacking information? And that I think it was from that day that my research really started
Okay,
because I
I
had
think
to,
I need to interrupt you a bit there.
yes, sir.
We'll definitely get back to that level. We are going to connect it. And it's very important for us to just connect it with this particular idea. I think the question now
Okay.
is, particularly from these layers where you are, opening us into the what we can call motivation, then the question that I would like to quickly push in for you so you can flesh out these layers together and blend them perfectly as you are doing already is then what is your motivation, then for choosing this kind of research? You're talking about Bekanto, talking about Africa. So, I mean, the motivation for choosing to, or, following the African route, the ideas, the kind of argument, the kind of focus that shapes this, your idea of, your own research. What is the motivation?
Yeah. And like you said, perfectly, feel free to interrupt and interject at any
Definitely.
time. Um, So, like I was saying, it was at that point with my professor that I realized that I had to look for a field of study that was lacking in information. And that's what true research is. It's not to rewrite what people have written, it's to find out information that people have not written about and to, you know, educate them on it more. So it was at that time I first started with African American music, and I was like, okay, just read into this. And I found out there's a ton of research here. And at that time also I was talking to Dr. Luranti about some of his songs for African recital that I wanted to put up. And I think those experiences together was what made me make my decision that okay, I really want to write about African music. And that was when I started doing research and I started reading articles and uh, different bulletins by Akin Yuba and speaking to different composers. Read some things by Dr. Mojola, and I was talking a lot with Dr. Ayorinde. So all of these that helped me shape that experience to start writing things about African music.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think there's another layer to this question, which I also want us to quickly, clarify before moving to the next question. And that is what is now more like a controversy or something that is still at its imagined form, or it's a discourse, an argument, it's a debate, and that is the difference between doing this kind of research or doing a specific type of, or being a performer. You have a trajectory that emerge from being a typical performer, licentiate, all those things, go into full-fledged training, an opera singer, then also now get into now using the same resources, the same material, as for research. Now, as you know, as a scholar, at least in the last 30 or let's say 20 years, there is this controversy between, if you are doing, let's say, PhD, you are a researcher, you blow big grammar, you do musicology, you do this. And on the other one is, if you are a performer, you are a composer, you don't need to write all this. You know how this
Right.
layers
Yes.
are classified. It's a big
Mhm.
debate, and which is also laced and layered with emotion, depending on the side you belong to. But what I've seen in your own trajectory is the fact that you marry these two debates. You blur the boundary. That is what I can see. Then that now brings us to that point, what is now called artistic research. Some call it creative research, which is a body of knowledge, it's a field of studies, and artistic research tends to be the mediating point between these two age-long sentiment and emotion. Performer, creativity, composer, and the other hand, ethnomusicology, musicology. But artistic research brings them together and close the gap. I can see you are wearing this cap. Can we call you as an artistic researcher, or you are a performer who just have a flair for writing, research, or doing, let's call it what it is, musicological work?
Mm.
That's the question for now.
That's a very good question. And like you said, it's a long, it's a long time debate because I've heard that in so many places. So one of the things for me was that um, I deliberately chose a program that accommodated performance, teaching, and research. And that was the reason why I chose James Madison University when I was moving, was because the degree in James Madison was in vocal performance, vocal pedagogy, and vocal literature. So it was all encompassing, which was the reason why I chose JMU. Because I wanted to learn of course, continue my performance. I wanted to learn teaching, which is what I'm doing right now, you know. And I also wanted to write. So I think that degree actually helped me shape that experience to what it is today. Even though I started that prior with my master's, with writing and still performing there. But I think, as you rightly put, was marrying those two fields together that I could say, okay, we're writing about Omo Agbeto as the singer and the performer in that opera. And I'm also writing about it from an educational standpoint. And I'm also writing about it from a researcher standpoint. And I think that was a really encompassing um, experience for me because, for once, and to be sincere, we need to give singers a little bit more credit because, whether we believe it or not, when we write program notes, except you do not do it with your full chest, but when we write program notes, that is actually marrying your performance with research. But I think we take it with a lot of levity back home. Oh, they told me to write about Mozart, so I'm just going to write whatever I can find. No. How about dig a little deep, find out what that Mozart music does for you? This is how we build research experiences. At least for me, that was how it all started. So, and I understand the division between PhDs and DMAs. I'm a DMA, but I publish just as much as a PhD holder would. And I think it was me shaping my experience to be what I want it to be. And I'm putting this out there for different people. Whether you decide to do a PhD or you decide to do a DMA, shape your experience to be what you want it to be. And I think that's one thing we have here in the United States is that I've seen a lot of PhD holders who still take voice lessons. They take it as an extra credit or however it works. So even if you want to do your PhD and focus more on ethnomusicology, you can still take voice lessons or saxophone lessons or clarinet lessons and continue the performance part of your career. And also, if you're doing a DMA, most DMA programs, a few don't have the requirement of writing, but most of them actually do. At least they will ask you to write a document, which is about 40 to 60 pages, which could still be a dissertation. There's so many dissertations that are within that range. So shape your experience to be what you want it to be, except you don't want to be a researcher, and that's fine too. You know, there's some people who they're like, see, I don't want to write, I just want to sing. And that's okay too. But we need to blur that line between PhDs and DMAs because you can shape your experience to be what you want it to be.
Wow, thank you so much. So it's actually about the person, not really about the label, PhD. Although this is another conversation, which hopefully we can have, perhaps later. DMA, PhD is another, can of worm that we don't want to open right now. But definitely we are going to have this later. So let's move to the next one, which I'm very, very excited about this now. So you embody these multiple layers of values, opera singer, scholar, and you said even in your work, you also co-compose, shaped your project, which is your final, opera. Now, the question, two in one, the first one that I would like to ask you, because the opera you wrote, Omo Agbeto Dolorin, that's a typical African from the Yoruba perspective, idea, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
But the question is, are you calling this African opera? That's one. The second layer is how do we define African opera? What constitutes African opera? I don't know.
Those,
Yeah.
okay. Those are really good questions. And those are questions that I've been asked all the time. um, So one of the things that Akinyuba wrote about was having two genres of African music, where we have the folk side of it, and then we have the neoclassical side of it. So in writing Omo Agbetodolori, I think we actually married both sides of that writing in the opera. Because according to Akinyuba, the folk side of opera, I will specifically push it to the opera side, is our really native traditional dialect opera, where we're not using any westernized instruments. We're using our own gong, our own yalu, and all of our instruments. And we're also speaking our language, not mixed, not interspersed with English, right? That's the indigenous opera, the indigenous folk opera. And then neoclassical part, and as much as we try to shy away from it, during colonization, there was also, it was not just colonization that went on, it was acculturation, which is why right now we're not speaking Yoruba to each other, we're speaking English, right? And as much as we want to say, oh, English was brought to us by the British, if we're truly decolonizing, we shouldn't be speaking or singing in English. And I hear there's a whole debate out there on what is truly, genuinely African music, right? And there is a school of thought that believes that it should not be English. It should either be Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, indigenous language. And I have a different perspective to that. And also based on the research that I've read about, is that yes, we do have that aspect of decolonization, but colonization wasn't the only thing that happened during that time. It was acculturation. And I don't think we address that part as also part of who we are. It's just like the candomblé of the Spanish culture. They speak Yoruba, right? And that's their indigenous culture. Now, that's where acculturation happens. And it doesn't mean that because that Spanish side or that African, not African American, um, Latin American part is speaking Yoruba, it means that they're less genuine. It only means that there's an acculturation that has happened. It's just like the way somebody will go to the UK for 2 weeks and they are coming back and they've lost their Nigerian accent. Right? Let's be
Yeah.
realistic. We see people like that. They're like, oh, hi, I just came back from the UK. And I'm like, sorry, you don't learn an accent in 2 weeks. However, because of the time they've spent, however short or however long that they've spent there, whether we believe it or not, acculturation has happened. And it doesn't take away from who they are. It doesn't take away from their genuinity, you know. So, and that's a really heavy part of our research nowadays is that we need to acknowledge both parts of our culture, both the indigenous part and the accultured part. And that was what we did with Omo Agbeto Dolorin, was that the overture was more of the folk part of African opera because it was just a percussion overture. And that was something that I was really, really heavy on with Dr. Ayorinde. I was like, I don't want violins, I don't want anything. I just want drums and dance. So the overture was just drumming and African dancing. That's it.
Okay.
And then as we went along, we had the neoclassical part of it where it was the regular opera singing, speaking English, singing in Yoruba, using westernized styles of singing. But then also in the middle of the opera, we have another part, the Oriki part, where it was also back to the folk part. So these things can be merged together, can be separated, but I don't think it takes away from our culture and who we are.
Thank you so much. I am really excited that we are entering into uh, some of the fragile, aspects of some unimagined discourse and ongoing conversation around indigeneity, identity, and what is now called, the new one, which is discourse around intercultural dialogue or dialogic, uh, you know, interactions in sociology, anthropology, or cultural studies. And what I would like to ask you, more of a follow-up question in that sense, is still on your production, your work, Omo Agbeto Dolorin. In one word, can you call it African? And by African in
Absolutely.
that sense, can you call it African? That's African. From the way you explain
Absolutely.
it. Okay.
Yes, because I think it embodies every part of us. Like I said, it embodies the folk part where we are like, okay, this is strictly African, African drums, African singing, African dancing. And it also embodies the accultured part of us. So if anything, it is fully African.
Okay. Fully Africa or authentic Africa?
Both. Both. And it also
Both.
depends on because that's another topic. What do we classify as authentic Africa? Or what do we think we want to classify as authentic Africa?
Yes. Well, of course. I understand the dynamics around this conversation, as mentioned earlier. It's been around and it's not something we are going to finish in one day. But before that,
No.
before next question, there's something I like to also throw on the table, to further enhance this conversation. And that's the point around, which you discussed earlier, the idea of, you call it acculturation. Now we call it borrowing, intercultural dialogue, discourse around identity, identity. So the question is African, European, all these are all labels now, you know, in sociology or anthropology, there's something called the word body. The body signifies identity, what we embody, how people perform. The body is, we perform in different ways. The ways I like to behave like an African, I to behave like an European. Like you gave example, somebody went to UK for 1 week and came back with accent. That's a performance. Yeah, that's the type of performance, like Judith Butler will explain, it's a form of performance. Some will say, no, though I am wearing shirt and trouser, I want to be recognized as LGBTQ. I want to be recognized as this and this and this. Although I am wearing skirt and blouse, I want to be called a boy, a what. So these are all forms of performance, they are performances, Then the question which relates to the conversation today is then, if we call the ways in which you are defining African opera, which the next question will further help us out, is that you mentioned acculturation, borrowing Western, borrowing. Now the question, I want to reverse this position now, to take it from the other side. And that other side would definitely be, do you think, what if an European who has come to Nigeria to do field work for almost 5 or 7 or 8 years at, let's use Mapo, Ibadan, or somewhere, one of the rural areas, do field work, learn the language brilliantly, and learn the drum or shekere, and went back to James Madison University and write the same thing, Omo Agbeto Dolorin, would you call it African? And using the same material you have used, the same way you've, designed, performed, and interpreted this beautiful work, how will you place it from the other side now?
and this can be my dissected. I think you could see that almost the same way that you would see an African singing Mozart, right? And we do a lot of classical repertoire in our schools today. We do Mozart, we do Handel, we do all of that stuff, right? So if an American came here,
Hello? Hello?
can you,
Okay, yes, I can hear you, please. Thank you. I
oh,
can hear you. Yeah.
okay. I think the only thing I will ask or demand from that person is an identity statement, is to boldly state that, hey, I understand this at a level of research. However, this is not my culture. And it's the same way I would identify that when I'm singing a French song. I'm not French. I don't know French. But I have sung a lot of French operas and a lot of French repertoire. Does it take away from my identity? No, it does not. However, I have decided that this is something I want to write about. It's just like me writing about bel canto. I'm not Italian. I wasn't there when the bel canto style started. However, because of my musical experiences, I have a deep understanding of what bel canto is. And that goes back to what I was talking about acculturation, is that whether we like it or not, every day we pick up experiences that may or may not be authentic to our culture.
Mm.
Now, does that make that less authentic? There's a whole school of thought that believes that if you are not that culture, it's not authentic, right? And there's a whole school of thought that believes that, okay, you can study it and actually gain some level of authenticity in it. However, like I said, the only thing I will ask from that person is identifying. Is when you do identify, is when you write it like as if it was your own. That's when, see, I'm upset, I'm offended. Because no, it's not your culture.
Mm.
So the thin line between those two aspects is, and that's why in research we do references.
Yeah.
You have to identify that this is not my idea. I'm referencing Akinyuba. I'm referencing Mozart's Così fan tutte that was written in the 1700s. You know, it's acknowledging that it's not my idea, it's not my culture. However, I have gained some understanding studying it and doing a deep dive into it. And now I feel like I have the confidence to write with the help of these references. The person that taught me the Yoruba that I'm writing about, I have to acknowledge that person. The person that told me how to do the Oriki that I wrote, I have to acknowledge that person. So
Wow.
for me, that's the standpoint I see that from. And I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Of course, it does. It does. Thank you. But now I understand from your perspective, from the scholarly perspective, you know, the tradition, the canon of reference, acknowledgement. Oh, this work is me, is this and this. Of course, I understand that perspective. But when you take Omo Agbeto Dolorin to Lagos, do people really care about how you came about the product? No, they just want to enjoy. And that's where this thinking starts from the ordinary people on the streets.
Mhm.
That's where the thinking starts from. They don't really care about if you are a white person, if you are Igbo, if you are Hausa speaking Omagbe, doing that beautiful chant, during the singing or the dancing, playing the gong. They don't care about that. All they
No.
care about is that particular time you are performing that identity. They give you what is something called the artistic license to that product. Oh,
Mhm.
a miracle is doing this at this particular time, and they don't really, and they don't really care if whatever identity you embody on that stage, all they care about is to give you that accolade of that what we call artistic citizenship. And
Right.
that citizenship also has its own, it has, how would I put it now? It has no border. And that border is the product of what is now called the challenge of identity today. You spoke earlier about bel canto. You sing bel canto, you sing in French, you speak in German. Let me tell you, when you go to stage and you sing those things, they don't really care in most cases. They only care about your diction, how well you can do it,
Right.
and the message, the communication. And that brings us
That's it.
back into the context of today, the ideas around identity, particularly from the musical and creative perspective, that people don't really care about what they care about the product. The product becomes a point of analysis and understanding.
Exactly.
It is
That's
called,
it.
it is in terms of recognition. And at that moment, they don't care about authentic or what is not authentic. They only care about, I enjoy that music.
Right.
I enjoy
It's,
that
it's,
product.
it's researchers and scholars that dig deep into that authenticity and they're like, oh,
Thank you
is it
so much.
really authentic?
Yeah.
Is it, or is it really not? And maybe sometimes we just need that simple mind of let's enjoy the music.
Exactly. And that is the point of, that's our point, that's our entry point today. The question, and this has been around in musicological discourse, even across performance, theory, composition. And this is where the boundary lies between scholarly canon and the public consumption of
Opinions. Yeah.
it could be artistic product, scholarly product. People don't really care about this multi-layered, no, they don't care. They care about the
No.
product. And that brings us to that basic idea of the problem of identity. It doesn't really matter anymore if this is a pure African. All they want to see that you're making music, it's making sense to them, it sparks something in them, and they want to dance. They want to
I
sing
think
along. Yeah.
to address what you're saying,
Yeah.
there will always be a difference
Yeah.
between an African performing an African work and
Definitely.
a non-African performing an African work. There's no way that you will not have that difference.
Okay.
Yeah, it will always be there. So that idea of, oh, we don't really care who. Um, I think in most cases, like even when I was casting for the opera, if there was any African in the room, sorry, that's the person getting the major role. And it wasn't a matter of oh, I'm being racially biased or I'm being no, it's still back to your point of authenticity. You know, if I have an African in the house, I would. But we also need to understand the part where we are also writing for the world. We're not just writing for ourselves. Because one of the questions that I got asked was that, okay, you are talking about decolonizing opera and making sure that African opera is being sung all over the world, not just the canonized European opera. How is a white man going to be able to sing what you just wrote? You know, because as Africans, as much as we want our music to be global. Or
Yes.
am I saying the wrong thing?
You're on point. You're on track. Definitely,
Right,
you're on track.
exactly. So we're also writing for an audience. We're writing for people to be able to see this music in Switzerland and say, okay, we're singing this, you know. So it's also putting that in mind. Now, if I'm in Switzerland and I find a bunch of Africans that can do it, let's go. But if I'm in Switzerland and I'm in an all-white school, how do I make it work that it's still as authentic as I would want it to be? you know. And I know we're basically out of time, but yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, okay, definitely. Thank you so much. Well, let's continue. I'm very
Okay.
sure during the Q&A, we will definitely follow up on this idea of authentic or inauthentic or, altered authentic, Yeah, it has different, yeah, so
It
then the
does.
next
It really
one
does.
before opening to our friends and colleagues online, which I would like to ask you is, as a professional performer and scholar, how will you explain African operatic vocal idiom and literature? Are there literatures? Where are they? What are they? And the idiom, what are they?
Okay. So, like I said previously, we have two aspects of this. We have the folk side and we have the neoclassical side. Now, the folk side is what we talked about earlier, what we classify as the authentic. No English, no accultured values added to it, just pure African. The second part is the neoclassical part where we're singing with violins, we're singing with a piano, we're singing with westernized instruments, we're singing with a westernized style. So it sounds like an opera, right? Whereas the folk style, we're sounding like the lady on the streets in the last Oro festival who was just singing Iba, oh! Right? That's those are the two major distinctions that we have. So for me, the vocal idiom is those two distinctions is having a part that is truly unaccultured. And then we have a second part where it's still part of our culture because we didn't have a choice on colonization. And like I said, right now we're speaking English. We're not speaking an indigenous language. So as much as we want to say, okay, we're decolonized from it, we have already been accultured. Means we have embraced that culture. We're using it as part of our culture. And that's the neoclassical side, where we have different genres. We can even add in a little bit of musical theater in there. And we have the classical styles of singing, the operatic, even we can even add some bel canto style. We're using violins and trumpets and non African instruments.
Okay, thank you so much. But the literature now, I mean the vocal idiom. Okay, you just explain. Bringing this multi-layered, skill sets into place. Then the literature. Are there African opera literatures out there? Are they popular, like what people can harness, what people can, take and perform, or or even scholarly materials that can
Yes,
inform creative, aspect of the work itself out there?
yes. I think in the last, I would say last 10 years, and kudos to our writers and our composers, they have done a lot of work in putting out our music. I know right now there's a platform where you could find African music and download music. And I know that part of people doing that's Akojokwo with their
Akujokwa,
African,
yes.
yes, with their
Yeah.
African music series and publications and all of that. Um, some of us are actually like a few conferences that I've attended. I've actually spoken extensively about African music. I've played some portions of my African recital, really getting the music out there. And even just last week, the dean of my school was asking for an Igbo score that they want to sing for the Christmas concert coming up, composed by Amukuru, who's also here in the United States. So I would say within the last 10 years, our composers, our writers, our publishers have really done a lot of work getting this repertoire out there. And I think even what we're doing right now is, I've seen videos of the organ house on YouTube, we are putting all of this information out there for people, in which prior to that, there was not a lot of materials. So I would say right now, yes, there are platforms, there are people to talk to, there are places to go to get African music, either majorly in Nigeria, but even in diaspora. There are websites, there are Ayorinde is on this call right now. He has written a million pieces on African music, Yoruba, Pidgin English. Dr. Mojola just wrote an opera last year, which we premiered, Fumilayo, at Mount Holyoke University, and he teaches at 5 colleges. So it was all 5 colleges together, and it was a huge production. So we are doing things to get it out there. And yes, this material is out there.
Thank you so much. I am happy that you laid out all these important factors contributing to the emergence or visibility of African operatic literatures and propagation of that idiom. Friends and colleagues, at this point, I would like to, take what we call, not commercial break, the organ house break. So first of all, for some of you joining us for the first time, this is the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. It's a space of experimentation, artistic exploration, creativity, and professional, engagement. So you can join us anytime on a weekly basis. We are here engaging different ideas from different perspectives: artistic, curatorial, archival, scholarly, performance, and different forms, even professional. Through the affordance of digital technology, we are also engaging different layers of ideas. So you are always welcome to join us on a weekly basis on this platform. I'd like to share with you our YouTube page. Kindly check us, follow us on our YouTube page. It's on the chat right now. You can click and follow us and join us in, if you are free. Also on our social media pages, we are on Facebook, we are on X, formerly Twitter. We are also on Instagram. You are welcome to follow us, particularly on our YouTube channel, because what we are doing right now is as a twofold aims and objective. The first is to have this conversation, to engage people across the world on a weekly basis. And we are happy that we have communities, not only in Nigeria, Africa, we also have from North America, from Europe, and also in most cases, we have friends who join from Asia. We are so happy about that. The second layer is this also doubles as a digital experimentation project and a digital archival experimentation. What we do, these resources are not meant to just go the way they should. We record live and we put them online for anyone who is interested to do further research. So this also doubles as a research collection. It's an archive. This particular recording is going to be online. You can go later and visit and use the material for your research, for your production, for whatever is good that can promote humanity and knowledge on African music. So if we run an open asset digital archive on our YouTube, you are welcome to check anytime and follow the materials there. So it's open, kindly engage, and that is the reason why we are doing this. We are making it open. Thank you so much. So I hope you will join us today and follow and also push the conversation the more you engage the materials. And if you have any question, any query, you are welcome to visit us at the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series. Drop us message, send notes, either on our YouTube page, we will definitely follow, or either on Facebook, Instagram, or X, Twitter. Yeah, so let's go back to the business of the day. And that I have just quickly, 2 questions, then we are going to open to our colleagues. I can see Professor Kwande. Prof, I will get to you shortly. We are getting there, yeah. And I'm happy that, we are ready. People are already getting ready to engage us. Thank you so much. Then, Dr. Amah, what is the future of African opera? Do you envisage any growth?
I think we're already seeing the future.
Oh, that's
The
great.
future is now.
Yeah.
The future is right now. The future is tomorrow when someone publishes uh, their opera. The future is the next day when someone writes about African opera. The future is next when someone goes to a conference at Yale or anywhere in the world and presents on African music. That's the future, is finding any way that we can. And people have accused me of this. They're like, oh, in all your recitals, you find every way to put in African music. I'm like, yes, because we should. Everybody should be doing that. Africa is a huge continent that our music is not getting out there, except our pop music. Yes, our pop music is off the charts, but our classical music and indigenous styles of music is not getting out there. So the future is right now, is that person right now writing their dissertation on African music. Is that person right now trying to publish an article on African music? I think I know a lot of people that are doing that work as we speak. So we just have to keep going.
Thank you so much. So the future is now. Thank you. Now, then the last question for the day before we open to our friends and colleagues online is, what is your advice to operatic singers in Nigeria and Africa, particularly young African women who aspire to follow your trajectory?
I would say never put yourself in a box. Never classify yourself. You see, what is killing everybody in the world is canons, is classifications, where we are like, oh, this is the canon. You have to sing two Italian arias, three French arias, and those were things I wrote about in my dissertation. That is what is killing us. So if you have an urge to sing something else, do it. If you want to sing jazz and classical music, do it. I have had the opportunity to do different genres of music, even while I was here, as I was doing my opera from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. I still went for jazz gigs. I took jazz classes in my master's. I took jazz classes in my doctoral studies. I took commercial music classes. So do not restrict your experience to fit a classification. Oh, I'm a mezzo soprano. I will only sing. There's so many mezzo sopranos. That's why I love Chichi Labatoli. See that woman? You see every role in Kosi Pantute, she has sang it. She has, she has sang everything. So do not limit yourself to a box because you're trying to fit into a pack or you're trying to fit into an identity that people have created for you. Explore, do what you need to do. If it's jazz today and opera tomorrow, as far as you have the skill, now get that right. You have to acquire the skill. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to sing jazz but with a classical voice." No, 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 no. Go learn the skill of singing jazz with actual jazz techniques or singing pop with actual pop technique and finding that distinction in your voice or even in research, finding that distinction or marrying both fields together. However you want to do it, make sure you're doing it the right way and do not try to fit into a classification or a description. That's
Wow.
my advice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amah. It's been an interesting journey with you today. Interesting conversation. Thank you so much. So at this moment, let's open to our colleagues. I'm sure they have questions for you. Already I can see two hands, I'm sure, and others will definitely ask questions, I know. So friends and colleagues, thank you so much for your patience and your time and for joining us today. So it's time for, you have questions, you have, ideas, you have things you want to follow up ideas on. Definitely, this is the time. So I'm going to start with Professor Adeolu, then we'll go to Mr. Kolawole. Then after Kolawole, we'll go to Juwon. Okay, so let's start from Professor Kwade. Professor Kwade, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Organ House, the head of department, and the convener and the coordinator of this program, Dr. Oladele. We can only say, may your generation continue to increase for good, and God bless you.
Thank you.
I'm surprised. I think our guest today is, please excuse my language, please. Is a small woman in an old woman's castle. She did not speak like one of her generation at all. And Dr. Amah, God bless you in Jesus' name.
Amen.
I'm
Thank you,
really
sir.
happy listening to you. The way you spoke like somebody who belonged to the generation of our grandfathers. Some of your responses, I personally enjoyed it, especially in the
Thank
area
you.
of communal living. You are trying to expatiate about how you jump into somebody's piano room, you go to Sheyi to do this, or but here it's not. It was just communal living that we enjoy in Africa. Nobody has copyright in traditional Africa. I'm talking of traditional African society now. Where the music emerged there, the community owns that music in traditional African setting. Be that as it may, what I'm not asking you a question, I just want to contribute and motivate you more about that. I want to motivate you more about that. Wherever you go, please don't be selfish. And you are not selfish, Dr. Amah, from what I've heard from you. What I mean by that is this. We have learned so much of Western music, from theory, history, performance style, directing, conducting, every damn thing about Western music. Africans, we can beat them to it. We can compete favorably with them.
Yes.
They may not want to agree, but we become selfish when we go out and we don't talk about our music. For me, it's selfishness. We have given a few examples, and we have given the examples you have given from Yuba down to Ayorinde, the Omojola. Look at their works. They are not selfish. Again, what I want to also add to it is this. One of the things that is killing most of us here is using Western yardstick to measure our standard. No. I am sure I've told several people at several fora that if Fela Anikulapo Kuti and Lagbaja go and listen to their music very well, if we are going to take voice in school, they may not take them. They will say they are not good singers because they are not singing class. But your voice is synonymous with you. And look at the marks those guys have made. So when you are talking of, don't just package yourself inside the box. Think outside the box. I was very happy. Whatever thing you want, let us do. If you want to do pop, just don't take it from the street alone. Also learn it, build on it, and do it very well. Do it very well. Whether we want to like it or not, Davido is as popular as Michael Jackson today.
Yes.
And he did his music in the college, but he chose that path. He was doing pop. This also call for people in Africa that we need to also review our curricula now in schools of music. When you are reading your resume, all the things you are saying, and most people who are over there started from Nigeria. If you could pass ABRSM from Nigeria through Muson, through MFM school, I think that should encourage us more that we can do it. But let us not be selfish. Wherever we are, Africa is so big, we have potentials, and we have fantastic people, human resources, everything. Maybe the only thing we don't have is leadership for now. Maybe that's what you don't have for now. So I am congratulating you and adding my voice to that aspect that look here, export our potentials, and God will be happier with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Really well said.
Thank you, Prof. Okay. Do you want to say anything more like a response to that, or we just move to the next?
And that's what we've been talking about for the last 1 hour plus. All of the things he has said. That's it. Wherever we are, let your voice be heard. Even if you are in a school where you are the only Black person there, share the African culture, share the African values with them. People are more open, and this goes back to education. This goes back to knowing exactly what you're doing. Is that sometimes in I'll use Nigeria specifically. We want to just what some of my friends will call fasabo. We just want to package it. No, don't package it. Study it. Know what you're doing. Take it to them. They will embrace it. But if you go there, you don't know what you're doing. You're just saying, oh, you're saying fa la la fa la la. Then they will look at you as, I don't understand. What are you doing? So make sure you are spending that time to know what you are doing and take it out there. This is how we're going to change the trajectory of African music in the world.
Thank you. Okay, let's have Mr. Kolawole. I hope that is Mr. Kolawole Ganikale.
Hello,
Mr. Kolawole.
this is me, Kolawole Ganikale.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Yeah, well, Mr. Ayo, Dr. Ayo, I would just want to say thank you very much once again for bringing this speaker who is so original in her thoughts, despite all the pricey exposure to Western influences. I want to say thank you very much. This has been very, very entertaining for me, and I agree with at least more than 90% of her position in everything she's been exposing today. However, I would like to engage her a little bit further. The last thing she said just now about not packaging ourselves when we get into the Western scenario in the diaspora, to make sure that we present our originality, what we are, and that the Western world will embrace it. No one can be more right than what she has just said, because I am actually going through, I've been, in this experience for many, many years now here in Europe. I would like to know your thoughts, madam, on my position, which has to do with the use of the word opera to describe the African performance tradition that clearly predates Western influence. This term opera is rooted in European music and theater. It comes from the Italian word for work, labor, and it was coined in Europe. Can you see? Am I still audible?
Yes,
yes, you are on. Yes.
We can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
Fine. Okay. I was saying that the opera, the word itself, is rooted in European music, which comes from the Italian word for work or labor. And it was coined in Europe to describe a specific and theatrical genre that combines text, that is libretto, with orchestral music, solo singing and stage drama, as such. Applying it to African tradition can sometimes feel like a misfit, or at least forced categorization within Western cultural framework. I think it can be limiting or even problematic. This is my view. The specific structure of Western opera with its formalized arias, recitatives, and orchestra interludes, it didn't exist in pre-colonial Africa. And many of our cultures here in Africa had and still have their own complex multimedia performance traditions that share several characteristics with this opera that we're talking about, including a combination of music, drama, storytelling, dance, and ritual. So what I want to engage you on, your thoughts, is does the term opera appropriately define this genre in Africa? Thank you.
Fantastic question. Fantastic question. And I promise you, this question has been asked before in a conference I attended. So we could go into, we can answer this question from two perspectives. First, we could view the word opera as a word. It's just like every English word that stemmed out from a different language. It's just like English that we speak right now. Most of the words are coined from Latin, French, Italian. So we could view opera as just a word that we use to classify music, which is music and drama, period. It could be that simple, that we're not reading too deep into it. Opera is music and drama. So whatever culture you are singing it from, it is just music and drama. Now, the second part is we could get critical, and this is where a group of researchers, is almost like what happened in the Florentine Camerata, right? We could make our own Florentine Camerata, call it a different name. And I have talked about this in a conference before, and I've talked about it with some colleagues. We have a lot of world-recognized scholars in our midst. In fact, on this phone call, we have. So we can say it's not that big of a deal. We can sit down right now and say from now on, we are no longer accepting the word opera for African music. We have decided to call it Ori, and this is me just making up stuff. Okay. And we have decided to call it Ori. What was drama in Yoruba? Sorry. That's not my language. Today we can decide to make that announcement and spread it around. And that's it. We have changed it. And that's how I think that we can make this change right now, as on this phone call. We can make this change. And from today, I can see Dr. Modular, I can see Dr. Ayorinde. Every work that they're going to write, they're going to reference this new name. And that's how we make a change. So, to answer your question, we could see this from two perspectives. Opera is just a word. Now, it depends on the culture. We can make it what we want to be, where we can say African opera is different from European opera. It's not the same.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
if people want to categorize them together, that's where that decolonization part comes in, where we can say, actually, no. And this was what I wrote about in my dissertation. They're not the same. And we can also take it to a whole new level where we ourselves can control that trajectory and say, we're changing the name right now. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, great response. From where I stand, well, everyone that knows me knows that I am an unrepentant African apologist when it comes into
please
African.
continue. Yes, continue to be. We should all be unrepentant.
Let me give an example. For instance, last week in the University of York, I presented a workshop in form of concert of a workshop on juju music, where I am trying to bring the study of juju into the academia. I want it to be I want students to be able to study and obtain a degree on the genre, just like students do obtain a degree on jazz and the rest of them. You know, and the students under my control are non-African students, Indians, Europeans, and the rest of them. And I had to formalize theories of making them understand the juju language of the guitars, how it communicates, how it is different from what they do with Indian or European and Western music and stuff like that. The semantics aspect of the understanding and presentation of that particular form. And we've been at it for a while, and the response has been quite encouraging, So I am having to change a lot of views about their understanding, because most of these people are, fantastic instrumentalists in the genre that they have been exposed to. And I made them realize that thinking have to change, presentation have to change, understanding change.
Yes.
The academic community here is really, really buying into it. Now, why I use that as an example is this. This thought about maintaining Western words to describe or
to fit in. Yes.
I think it's kind of demeaning, and it is more or less like continuously. I mean, it seems that we are not really snatching ourselves away from the Western hegemony that has affected all of us, which you rightly said in this conversation, that is the same thing that leads to you and me conversing in English now, making us miss and losing our originality. I think we have to make a decision, and we have to make a drastic and damning decision to just begin to change the narratives.
That's it.
Because take it or leave it, we cannot continue to live in the shadow of the West, either in terms of educational curriculum or economy or politics or come what may that you mentioning. I mean, the way you have spoken today, I was just I agree with almost everything you have said, and I think we need such minds like yours, and we need to speak to the authorities and the powers that be, who seem to not see things from this perspective. And when we mention it, they kind of agree with us, but they tend to just withdraw, to say, well, that's what our teacher taught us. That is what we are.
No.
That's what you have taught us.
And I completely agree with you, sir. I belong to the school of thought that everything was created one day. See this electricity we are using. Somebody sat down and did it time after time after time, again and again and again, until it worked. And if you want to influence change, we have to take drastic measures. So if we are deciding that, we're not using the word opera anymore, that's it. Who is writing the publication? Who is giving I'm ready to give endorsement right now. All of us put together, give the endorsement that as from today, in every publication that we write, we're no longer using the word opera. In our classrooms, we're no longer using the word opera. That is how we cause change. See, it's that simple. It really is that simple. And that was how even the operatic genre, that's how it was formed. Like I said, Florentine Camarada, these people sat down together and made decisions and said, okay, you know what? From now on, we want to talk about Rococo era. And that's what we're going to call it. And since 16 something to today in our history classes, we're still using those terms. It's the same way we need to create such a forum, sit down and start making those changes, start writing publications, start making it the new normal. Give it the next 10, 15 years, every African in universities, in colleges, everywhere in the world now knows that Kosher opera is no longer opera anymore. It's now this. That's how we
Prof.
make a change.
I think Professor Kwade has aptly and rightly described you as a young woman in an old person's body. You know, it will be interesting to know what professors in this forum will have to say on this issue. It will be interesting to know what their contributions will be. Thank you very much for this engagement. You know,
Thank you,
much
sir.
appreciated.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kolawole Gani Kale. Thank you. And thanks, Dr. Amah, for that, insightful response and engagement. Now, let's move from York, New UK. Let's go to Pittsburgh in the US. Mr. Juwon,
Yes, Mr. John.
let's have Mr. Juwon. How are you today? Please, let's have
I
you.
am good, Dr. Why, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's so nice to be here and to, experience this presentation by Dr. Miracle. It's been a while that we've conversed anyways. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, so
And
nice to hear from you.
thank you for this presentation. I mean, I love to see things like this. Exploring some of our own practices and putting it out there, revitalizing it, reshaping them to fit into, contemporary spaces. I am in for that. That's what I'm also like working on. So thank you for that. And I'm also glad that, while listening to your responses, you are very much open to, changes and, a new thought process through these things. Because one thing is that we would never to an extent know everything. We always encounter articles, people who will, change our trajectory in some ways and open our eyes to some things. So
Yes.
I was also going to talk about the identification of what you're doing, like the African opera. So it's me like piggybacking on what's has been said. And I was actually approaching it from another angle just to, make us realize how we are approaching some of these things. Even when we have good intentions, even when we want to do all these things, sometimes the way we think through them in terms of naming, in terms of the word we use to qualify the interactions, sometimes could limit or could in a way put our artistic work in a very critical space.
Books.
Yeah, So thinking it through another angle in terms of naming, there is this idea of exnomination. It's like one word that I learned from George Lewis. I'm in the jazz study, so they use some of this word. It's idea of like naming the other. It's the idea of if I say give me a name of an instrument, it is easy for you to say, oh, violin and all of that. Where talking drum and all of that becomes indigenous instruments. You see what's happening there. Western instrument is the instrument, but any
Right.
other indigenous
It's
instruments, they are
African
local.
instruments.
Exactly, they are local instruments. You see, so it's the way I'm approaching what the naming. When we say opera, we are only thinking in one direction. And yes, it could be as simple like it's a word, and the etymology is in Italian language. But opera has a practical realization to it, which even makes it like when you name it, it is not necessarily viewed as just like an English language. People know, oh, it's this kind of singing, it's kind of, theatric.
It's a style of singing. The vibrato.
And yeah, so when you
Yes.
have a prefix African to it, African opera, in a way, it makes it like a prototype of the original. It presents it like that, which is where I'm coming from. Like it gives it that otherness, that idea of nomination. Oh, the main thing is opera, but this African opera is the other thing. You understand? It gives it that kind of vibe, which is why what I was going to talk about. And you can actually give it your own name. It doesn't have to be a scholarly agreed nomenclature, or you can give it your own name, and people would write about it, and it would be written that, oh, it is
That's it.
yeah, I mean, it can be like that. Then the other thing I wanted to talk about is also like when you're talking about like you rightly said, you mentioned Akiuba, who mentioned the influences or the interactions between different cultures, right? Because one thing I learned from him as well is to learn about the actors that influence Yoruba music in terms of the shared culture we have with other Nigerian tribes, the shared culture, and I'm not necessarily talking about the Yoruba alone. I'm saying it's more largely, you understand, the
Yeah,
shared culture we have
Nigerian
with
music,
other
yeah.
African people, the shared culture, the culture we also like adopted from like the Westerners, cultures that we got even from like religion, Islamic religion and Christianity, they've influenced our music in some ways, right? So, but I think I'm also like concerned about the terms that you use. I mean, you're saying so much, you're talking so much about acculturation, right? But one thing
Yes.
I also I've learned about the word that I read from Margaret Katomi is like there is a kind of stratification when it comes to like talking about acculturation. It's it presents a relationship between two cultures
Pardon. Yes.
making one dominant. There is a dominant culture influencing the other. And I think
Mhm.
nowadays we always want to talk about interactions between culture, not necessarily one influencing the other, but what was taken from this culture and what is taken from this culture brought together and presented, rather than a culture dominating the other. And I feel like
Mm.
acculturation has that label of dominance, like, oh, it's the Western culture dominating over African culture. So it gives that kind of acculturation vibe. I mean, Margaret Katomi in a way problematized that word in like 4 or 5 ways. But this is one of the ways that I've always used that make me not to use the word. I use more of like transculturation. Now that could have been problematized too, but I vibe more with that. But you know, like I said, we have good intention about talking about this, but sometimes the way we um
No,
um
I
use
absolutely
them,
agree with you
yeah.
that acculturation, there's always a dominant culture. 100%. Yes. And that's why we still need to hold on to our own values, our own style, or what we consider as indigenous. However, like I said, right now, me and you are not speaking in Yoruba or Igbo, Hausa. We're speaking English. And that's because of the acculturation, transculturation, colonialism, however you want to name it. Now, you have spoken very rightly. Like I said, we can take a radical approach to this. And me, I believe in no wasting of time. If we want to take a radical approach, please, when are we starting? Call me to the meeting, I will join. You know, we can take a radical approach to this and say, okay, we are going to change all of these words, one word at a time. Okay, let's mix. We're changing opera. Okay, we're changing what's the expectation for the right now categorized operatic singing. Now, the problem we have in the world today, and it's not just with African opera, and I wrote about this in my dissertation, it's all over the world. The problem we have is canons. We have canonized words, we have canonized repertoires, we have canonized things to be the normal, and every other thing is not normal. Now it doesn't matter where who is the dominant culture, like even English, most of the words are stolen from Latin, French, German, but we still say it as English, right? We did not acknowledge the other words. Dictionaries sometimes acknowledge those things, but not really. We still categorize it as, oh, it's English. It's not really. So the problem we have all over the world right now is that acculturation. And the reason why we have that problem is canonization. We have canonized these words. Now, is it your fault, Mr. John? No. Is it my fault? No, it's not my fault. Now, can we change that trajectory? Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. Let's get radical. Let's do it. I'm down for it. But until we take that radical approach, sorry, we're going to keep using those words because that's what people understand. And that's why and I hate it when this happens. You see an American person come to me and they're like, oh, you have an accent. I'm like, dude, I speak English just like you, if not even better, but okay. you know, it's because there is this canon that if you are American speaking English, this is how you should sound. Who made that canon? We don't even know. Who started it? We don't know. But if we truly want to make change, then we should start. Period. That's it. That's it for me. Until we start making these radical decisions, the acculturation, transculturation, colonization will continue. That's it. That's my answer to it. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my perspective.
Thank you so much, Juwon. Thanks so much. And it's nice seeing you again. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Amah, thank you so much for that. I think there's a point I quickly want to drop in, which the notion of acculturation, canon, labels, and this they all boils to one thing: the politics of representation, which is shaped by what we call power relation. So when you say power relation, what do we mean? Acculturation, canon are created by what we call power. What is power? The forms of domination. It might not be white and black again. In fact, even the ways in which the black, the African, the Nigerians further propagates the colonial idea itself is a form of power relation. It's a form of maintaining canon. Look at Nigerian school, for instance. If today people still use words like, there's a word they use for music theory, which I once addressed somewhere that, look, it is not that. It is called music literacy. Yeah, there's a word they use, very, very rudiment of music. Yes, thank you so much, our engineer here. So they call it music rudiment. No, those are stale words. They use rudiment of music, or because it is actually music literacy, and that is what is being called elsewhere. Even in ABRSM, it is called music literacy, or other forms of examination. It is called music literacy. So those are ways in which, and we can actually dig further in other ways. So naming is a powerful tool that we take for granted. The way we call something, the way we interact with it, the name is powerful. It endorses, there's a way a name endorses phenomenon and power. So when you call it this and that, there's a power relation there. And that power relation is also shaped by economic power, economic capacity. So, for instance, Dr. Amah is talking about, let's call it no opera, let's call it, I'm ready, fine, it's good. What if you do all the meeting and you say it's no more opera? Then the question is, who is going to sponsor? Although that's another conversation, which is very, 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 deep, than just talking about the coloniality. It's about power. Economy determines power. That's how these things work. But we can talk about this. I just want to open us to that layer also. Power relation is the key thing. And this power is further propagated not by white again, also by us, for our own self. And this relates to a question here, which is by one of our good brother, our friend. Let me quickly read it out quickly before it gets, Mr. Isuola. I'll get to Mr. Joshua David now. I'm coming, please. We'll go to Toronto, Canada very shortly. So let's talk about Mr. Isuola. Mr. Isuola, are you there? Do you want to ask your question? Yeah, I can see you. Okay. The question is, okay. I have a question, ma. In the context of Nigerian music education, how can African opera be integrated in a way that respects and preserves indigenous musical traditions while also embracing global artistic practices? That's the question.
Yeah. I feel like this has already been done. In several ways, African opera is being, as we speak, it is being integrated into indigenous musical traditions, and we're also we're also opening it up to global artistic practices too. And that's what we've been talking about, the folk side and the neoclassical side, where we have the indigenous part of it, and then we also have the neoclassical part of it. So these are things that are already happening. Look at works by Dr. Omojola, Moremi is more folk opera, while Fumilayo, that was premiered last year, is more neoclassical. It uses different orchestral instruments. So these things are already happening. I think it's more of just now we educating ourselves and being aware of the community that we're in and knowing when something or what's going on. So Dr. Matala is on this call. Ayorinde is on this call. These are resources that or people that you can reach out to and ask, what do you have for this? And that's how I started. I reached out to Dr. Lawrence and I was like, okay, do you have something for this? I need a soprano solo that goes this high, that is in this language and has this style. And he's like, oh, I wrote something last year. Let me share it with you. That's it. So it's making these relationships, building these relationships, and also keeping ourselves appraised on what is going on in the African music world right now. But what the question you're asking, it's already happening.
Wow, thank you so much. And I hope that answers your question, Mr. Isuola. Thanks so much for your question. Thank you very much. Now, let's move to Canada. Let's stop at Toronto.
Mr. Canada.
Yeah, let's have Joshua David. You have the floor.
Hello. Good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't. Hi, Morocco. How far? What's going on? Okay, let's leave our non-official space.
Mr. Josh. Okay, let's be professional. Thank you.
Let's. I first of all want to say thank you. For all the work you're doing and fantastic presentation. I am slightly, just very slightly at variance with a couple of things, and this is just informed by just a few things that I think we could, if rough edges, we could just look at here and there. Juwon has spoken about one of them, which is the issue of a dominant culture, and then power relations, all of that. That's one side of it. But and this happens every time. We still had a talk yesterday with the SEM people, and Juwon was also there yesterday at the SEM. And I keep asking this question, that there is an idea that seems to be the crux of African music scholarship these days, that seem to be that we are I don't want to say playing victim. We're trying to describe our works and the things we do and all of that as an attempt to reclaim a space, instead of as an attempt to establish our Africanness wherever we find ourselves in the world.
Yes.
And so, which is why I remember a couple of weeks ago, Agatha Holland was here, and I asked her the question: does she think that by singing in the operatic voice, there is an erosion of an Africanness in her? And we had that conversation. I'm going to ask you that question again today, but I want to put it this way. You have written this beautiful work with Dr. Ayorinde, whom we always have this conversation with also. But my question to you would be, in your thinking about African music, the operatic voice, how do you conceive of Africanness within all of this? So Omo Agbeto Dolorin is an African opera. We can decide to keep teasing that word, African opera. Is it opera? Is it not Africa? Opera comes with its own histories. African comes with its own histories. The amalgamation of the two becomes a new art form and all of that. That's all well and good. But I'm particular about this idea of pre-colonial Africanness, indigenous Africanness, and Africanness in the world. Africanness in the space that is transcending what we would naturally call, okay, let me say it this way, and most of us that claim to be traditional Africans do not have traditional upbringing.
Yes. Thank you.
And then we then leave Nigeria, right? We leave Nigeria in an airplane to go to the United States or go to Canada. We did not use Egbe. We didn't say no, let's use Egbe to travel.
I am
We then
authentically Nigerian. I'm going to walk
We
to the
then
United
use
States.
an airplane to travel to the US to go and study in a university that is created and has a particular type of history. And then there, we then say we are trying to reclaim the indigenous Africanness we did not reclaim when we were singing ABRSM from grade 1 to grade 8 and licentiate and all the exams we were running up and down doing all those days and singing duets all over the place in the country. So I think that it's important for us to understand when we say we are trying to reclaim some sort of Africanness. So my question to you is, what level of erasure do you think, or do you think there's an erasure in your understanding of opera, in your performance of opera, whether African opera, whatever you prefix it or suffix it with? I really am not, I think that it's important for us. Dr. Oluroti has put up his hand. I knew it.
I love it.
I knew it. So I want to ask you to just talk to me about the level of engagement you have with Africanness in your space, in your work, and then that word. Is there, do you think of your voice as an erasure of in some sense, or do you think of an erasure of an Africanness in your work, or do you think of your work as being an attempt to bring to bear an amalgamation of some sort or a transculturation of some sort? Thank you.
Mr. Joshua, as I saw your hand up, I knew it's about to happen. We're ready for this. Now, I really like the way you put it, because and this also tells us that it's so deep, and that's why when I was answering Juwon's question, I said it's not even in Nigeria, it's not even an African thing. This is a world thing. Is that what? And that's a good question. Are we trying to reclaim a space, an already urbanized space, or are we trying to create our own narrative of a different space, irrespective of what has been created? Now, that's a whole topic for another day, because if I start, we'll be here for another 3 hours. But that's a good question. In respect to the major question that you asked, that as a singer, how does my voice relate to African music, or what does it spur up, and all of that? Now, I would say I will answer it from 2 different perspectives. One, like you rightly said, as much as we can say we are trying to create a narrative for ourselves, let's not lie to ourselves. In Muson, I was being taught how to sing Kosifan Tute. We did European operas. We were taught in the westernized in our classrooms today in Nigeria. In fact, even more so, we are being taught westernized ways of classification, music history, music theory, all of that. In fact, now I'm actually upset. I'm upset at the fact that in our schools in Nigeria, and maybe it has changed since I left, it's been almost 8 years now, we are not teaching the historical part of African music, Nigerian music. That's not the main topic. We are more concentrated on the Mozart and the Haydn, Father of Symphony, and all of that stuff. And yet, we are the same ones doing a Luther for change. That was something I wrote about in my dissertation. Is that how do we even change it out there when we are still doing the same thing? In Muson, at least when I was there, the requirement is for auditions into the school, you have to sing one Italian aria or song, one French, one German, one this. We have canonized even our own schools to fit into the westernized culture. So if we don't start our change from our own house, how do we intend to fix the change out there? I'm just putting it out there. I'm not fighting anybody. Now, sorry, I deviate to your question. As an African woman, I see my voice in different perspectives, and that's just me. It's different for different people. So I'm speaking to my instrument. I have trained my instrument to be flexible to different genres of music. As I'm here, if you want to start jazz starting, I'm here for it. Yeah, yes, it's westernized. I remember, and Dr. Oluranti can bear me witness for this. The first time and it's so sad. The first time I actually sang Oriki, it was in Amah, and I remember that 2 days to the performance, I and Dr. Oluranti were still like, oh yeah, this is how you should sound. Oh, no, don't sound like that. And he was still sitting down there with me saying, oh yeah, I've even forgotten the Ricky. This is how it should go. This is how the inflection should go. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria. I was born in Lagos. I speak Yoruba. And it's now that I'm in the US that I'm understanding the inflections of how an Oriki should be sung. We have a problem. We have a problem. Yes, it's the truth. And we need to change it in our schools first before we even start preaching the message to the world. And like I said, it's been a while since I've been in any Nigerian school. So I don't know if these changes have been made, but I'm speaking from the perspective that was the experience that I had when I was back in Nigeria. But it's so sad that it's here that I'm not even learning the African culture more than I was when I was back there. So with that being said, I think me, myself, as a singer, I have put in the work to understand how to sing African styles as indigenous as can be, and also how to sing the westernized style as authentic as I can make it, even though it's not my culture. And that in itself is what I use to embody every style that I sing, whether it's African music, it's jazz, it's classical music, and that's what speaks to my my identity as a performer. So yes, the way I sing invokes or speaks to the African side of me. And when I sing this opera or I sing this work, yes, I'm being connected to my roots.
Okay, thank you. So just one line, a one line recap now. What you are saying is that whether you sing bel canto, whether you sing jazz, whether you sing African Oriki, you are saying that your implicit Africanness is being expressed throughout that, through your voice at any level of your singing. Yes,
absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Because no matter how we say it, you see, French is not my language. So I will always have a non-French accent. Whoever wants to deal with it can deal with it. Sorry, you gave an African woman a French role, deal with it. It's just the same way that if you give me a Yoruba song or an African song, I have the culture in me to sing it, and I can keep going on. But I hope that answers your question, Mr. Joshua.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Joshua, and thank you so much, Dr. Amah. There's a point here before I invite Dr. Oluranti, Maestro Ajayi, and Juwon again. And that point is also further strengthening the table before we have Dr. Oluranti. I am happy when it was not so strange when Dr. Amah said she learned Oriki in the US. That narrative is similar to those common narrative that we hear, that I got to know that I'm black when I get to UK. I get to know that I'm black when I get to Frankfurt. I get to know that I'm black when I go to the US. Then the point then, can we then say that to become to be an African, or to discover one's Africanness, one needs to go out of Africa to discover it, because it is not being taught in Nigerian school, for instance. You don't learn talking drum, you learn Mozart, you learn everything. But the moment you get to the US, you started learning all these things. That consciousness of being an African comes to you, and you want to drive it with all your energy. You want to learn Igbo, you want to do this. Why are Africans in Nigeria are not discovering their Africans in Nigeria? Why are this not being taught in Nigeria? Then that takes us to one point, which has been the elephant in the room on this platform. We are all Afropolitan now. To be an African is to be everywhere in the world. And in this case, to be an African is usually a foreign thing. It's not from home. It is discovered outside. You go to America, you discover, oh, I haven't learned this in Nigeria like you discovered. You go to where you discover this. But when you are at home, you are being fed foreigners. You become Mozart, you become Bach, you become the best jazz, you become all these things. And you know nothing about talking drum. You know nothing about Ewi. They even call it is fetish. It is this and this. They call it different names. But the moment you get to abroad, those strange things becomes normative for you. Then you start running around to get acquainted, to become master of them. I just want to open the table. Dr. Oluranti,
Yes.
please, come in.
Dr. Ayo, Afropolitanism is here, sir.
Well, thank you again, host, for bringing a terrorist into the gathering. Miracle, who is a terrorist. Thank you for all you've shared. We always fight, we don't agree. And there's a lot on the table. I just want to, you can't respond to everything I have to say. I'm just going to put everything on the table. You all disagree with me in the house. That's fine. But let me take it in reverse action from what Dr. Ayorinde just said now. This issue of, for the first time, actually, I agree with Joshua Davids. He said some things I agree for the first time, and that calls for celebration, actually. When we are talking about, we want to assert our Africanness under this theoretical framework of Afropolitanism. We want to assert our Africanness outside Africa, when we don't even know that Africanness in our own house, where Miracle Ogo never did the Jala singing. She now went to America. She started thinking about it. And then we want to assert ourselves. Earlier on, you said within this component of interculturalism, acculturalism, that one culture dominates. You are half-baked in your own culture. You go abroad to another culture to now learn how to be an African in a matured system. And then you put on the cap of Afropolitanism. It's pathetic.
It's so sad.
It's pathetic.
It really is.
Earlier on, you said something that an African man will go to England for 2 weeks. He will come back, start speaking.
Yeah, accent, of course.
Hey, hallelujah. Chinese, America, Russian, they come to Nigeria for 1 year. They don't even aspire to speak our languages like us.
No, they're still speaking their language.
Exactly. They just want to understand your language to know what you know and then enslave you again. Then you go to America, you start slurring your R and
Right.
feel
It's
like
a bird.
Afropolitanism. They feel and try to belong. Do you get it? There's something so wrong with us Africans.
Is it true?
So wrong. Now, I jotted something that Professor Kwade said, we shouldn't use Western standards to assess our music, to assess ourselves. We shouldn't. I connect that to what Mr. Kolawole Ganikale I just read it. He said that it was talking about the unfortunateness of our colonial experience, where we keep thinking that we want to relate everything to the Western standard. Do you get it? And then in our culture, we are half-baked. Look, yes, me too. I didn't know anything about African music. And that's been my curiosity, why I want, and when I decided to study music. And it's a shame that for the first time, I got trained in Yoruba folk opera in America.
It's good. Yeah. I know.
In America. That was when I now started getting into all these things, because all my life, I've always been looking up to the Western standard. Now, Miracle, you said something I don't agree with. You said, how should we write the opera for the global space, which is marketable, which the white man can perform? I don't care. The white man cannot perform a music. Can the white man say Kolongo? Don't say. He said that. And these are things that they are intricate to my music, and I just need you to do it rightly. Do you get it?
Yeah.
Look, you don't understand that culture. You now go to America. You now start blowing grammar. I don't know. You see, I think really for us, it's time for us to take inventory and take stock of how colonialism has ruined us. And let us be honest about it. Look, I don't have a problem with intercultural music. That's fine. A beat from that, put it together. That's fine. But one thing you have to understand is that because of our colonial experience and our exposure to Western art music, there's a problem. Because that Western art music is mature. It took its full course. It's stabilized. It's theorized. It has a framework. So when you are in the same room with that idiom, that your Africa is here. Africa is here.
Europeans here.
Is there. And then
is the truth.
The thing that pains some of us is this, that we know that this our African thing has substance. It has things that are hidden that we need to develop. But as long as we keep staying in the room of interculturalism, acculturalism, Afropolitanism, Nism, Jism, Islam, and all those big things, we will continue to be slaves. Okay, earlier on, when you started this conversation, and Dr. Amah and Dr. Ayorinde, you both agreed that, okay, the people on the street, they don't want to know how you compose your music. They don't care about your music is authentic or African or not. They just want to enjoy it.
It's entertaining.
And they just want to enjoy it. And I'm like, it's more than that. It's just like saying Nigeria is rich in oil. Why are we poor? Yeah, this, yeah, dancing, and then, and almost everybody on the street, they don't know OPEC regulation. They don't know the politics of America trying to drive the oil industry down. Do you get it? So you are operating superficially. Nobody just enjoy the music. They take the music to the. You want to know why they enjoy it and why they don't enjoy it.
And that's
You
scholarly.
want to go to the nitty-gritty. That is what we should be concerned with, the theoretical principles of what we're doing. Because you throw your music out there, whether it's good or not, people will clap.
Right.
People will clap. But then, what is solid? Is it solid? Is it not solid? And then the next thing, Afropolitanism. 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 Something tonism. Ism. That ism. That ism. Then grammar. Please, let us take stock. Now, let us revisit this issue of
Can I say something to address what you just said, sir?
Yes, sir.
And I completely agree with you. And that's why earlier in my presentation, I said there are two ways to go about it. We could continue to look at, the African music and the African genre as, okay, opera is just a word. We are fitting into it. We have taken it as music and drama. We're just coining our own narrative, which is what Joshua David mentioned. That are we trying to reclaim a space, or are we trying to create our own, thing? Now, there's the other part, which is the radical part, which is what you're saying, is that we are trying to reclaim a space, whereas in our own space, we are still accepting the dominance of the European culture.
Yeah.
So how do we change a space out there if our own space, we have accepted that dominance? And that's a good place to start, is what are we doing in our own schools to change these spaces?
I don't even know.
It's so sad, sincerely. Till I came to the US, I think it was like 2 African songs that I sang. It was the Adora Fun Alafia and Professor Laz Ekweme's, I think it's no. Those were the 2 songs I ever sang before I moved here. And now I have almost 50 African songs in my repertoire. So it's so sad that we're fighting to, okay, how do we change opera? How do we change what this means? When we have not fixed our own space. And that's a decision for us to make. Do we keep accepting that, okay, opera is just a word? Or do we say, you know what, from now on in Mountaintop University, the criteria for audition is 1 Yoruba song, 1 Igbo song, and whatever you want to choose. How do we change our own spaces?
You see, first of all, number one, just for me to wrap up, you hit the nail on the head, in the sense that a lot of us, we became more African when we left Africa.
Yeah.
And then when you go and check the scholarship of Ayobankole Senior and Akin Yuba, you discover that that's what happened to them. They became more African when they left, But you see, the problem we have right now is this. We are leaving Africa. We are not becoming more African. We are doing more of Afropolitanism. What we don't understand. We are doing Greek, goes. It's all economical. As far as I'm concerned, it's economic. We want to survive. And we want to know all that. Oyibo can harmonize in SATB, I can do it too. Oyibo can play sonata, I can play it.
SATB, is it not Western culture? But okay.
Yes, I will do it as an African. Look, don't let us fool ourselves. Miracle, your instrument is a soprano voice, operatic voice, whatever you want to call it. It's a Western instrument. At some point in time, I was so crazy, I was thinking of how to play the organ and write organ music in an African way. After a while, I gave it up. Said it's insanity. It's impossible. Now, so Igbos, they have this thing. Go and look at your dundu and see how you can write for that. So to round up, to answer what you put on the table, that how do we fix this problem? Very cool. Now that you are talking like this, come back to Nigeria. Come back. Come back to Nigeria.
Come back to Nigeria.
That's where you're going to. You have been trying to get it to come back. No problem. I'm coming back next year.
Come back to Nigeria. Let us come and preach this thing. Let us be more African. Let us go more to the grassroots. Let's go to the countryside. Let's go to Baghdad. Let us go to Ekiti. Let's stay there for 1 year, 2 years. Let mosquitoes be our companions.
No, I'm too tush for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Wow. Thank you. Okay, quickly, we are going to have Ayo Ajayi. Can we have you, Maestro? Then after that, we have Juwon, then we'll close for the day. Please.
All right, thank you. And then Miracle, it's nice to see you again. Nice, I've enjoyed this session, and then really interesting and really, worth the time that we've spent here. So mine is just basically, I think Dr. Oluwanti has touched on the points that I actually wanted to make. And it is about how this colonialism of a thing and the way we think about globalization has actually erased a lot of things. And then I know that recently during a research of mine, I started looking out for real traditional things. And I realized that music, when we talk about music, it's even difficult to lay hands on pure traditional materials. What you get are the influenced materials. Like we mentioned things like Apala, Juju, and Fuji, and all these things. These are even influenced. These are not our traditional materials. I have to go back to dance materials. If you go to Bata, Apekwe, and all those performative artistic creations, they are pure. They are very pure. And from there, I started saying to myself, okay, what could pre-colonial African music what could it have sounded like? Because you needed to listen to, or even take it away from Yoruba land, go to a place like Middle Belt, I think Tiv, and listen to something like Swangi. The way it is done is different. It's totally different. Now, the problem is that our civilization has been breached by colonialism. So unfortunately, we're not at that height where the Western music is right now. And then we as scholars, we're finding it difficult to go back to the roots and build. Finding it difficult to go back to the root and build because we think that, okay, the world is here already. Why go back? The world is here. Let's just go ahead and create it and create something. The point is that where is the foundation? What's the foundation that we are creating on?
What's the root?
What's the root? And then, Dr. Oluwanti said something about the Western instruments. I know that there is a lot of influence on our voice, as even for me as a Yoruba man, the way I speak. I want to speak good English. We want to wear Nike. We want to wear designers. We're not wearing anything African. We would rather wear designers, and it's a thing of the mind. And then when I listen to people like I listened to a recording from Josiah Ransom Kuti, one of the first recorded albums of Christian music when Christianity was just first coming into Nigeria. Josiah Ransom Kuti, you could hear the Africanness in his presentation. But then when it comes to accompaniments, you realize that he has been beaten by the bug of 145. Because the accompaniment was, and I know that back then they used to do a lot of F sharp because I even tried it. I said, this is F sharp. And then it was just 1, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5, 1. But the voice still speaks so much African. So mine is not a question, it's just a contribution. We really need to get back. We need to get back. Like, for example, for all my researches right now, I'm trying to do a lot of dance music. I'm trying to do a lot of dance music because these are elements that have been passed through oral tradition over time. They've come through oral tradition. Even all the Oriki that we're talking about, they've come through oral tradition over time to, and then it's the same thing with when you look at Oduifa. These things have traveled centuries for them to get to where we are right now. So I think that these are the pure materials that every scholar that thinks that they do African music needs to go back to. Forget the Akpala, the Waka, the Juju. Yes, they're good. They're good. They're very good. They could be layers. They could be layers as well. But we need to really understand what the traditional materials are. before we can build anything African music. Thank you.
Wow.
And yes, I want to add to what Ayajaya said. And I think Joshua also mentioned it in the comments, is what do we envisage, or what is our idea of pre-colonial African music? What is the unadulterated version of African music? And I don't think that has been defined yet by anybody. And that's just the truth. Is that we're like, oh, okay, we're going to write this in High Life. Yes, High Life too had its deep roots in jazz and funk. So it's not really our music, just like Ayajaya said. So I think we ourselves need to fix this, our space. And where we need to start from is, what are the characteristics? What have we decided as the identity of our music, unadulterated? Then we can now start saying, oh, okay, this style of music needs to fit into this bracket. Because whether we like it or not, we're writing soprano solos with piano accompaniment. Piano is an European instrument. So we have not really fixed it. We're just embellishing the space, right? So what exactly is that indigenous, unadulterated version that we want to create for ourselves? The style of music that does not include African, European piano, does not include the violins, the guitars, because guitar is European too. These are all musical instruments. It's the truth. And yet we're there, and we're enjoying it as African music. No, it's not. If we really want to go into the nitty-gritty of it. So how do we fix this space from an unadulterated standpoint? Those are questions that we need to be asking, and I don't have the answer. If you ask me now, what I go ask? So how do we fix this space to be as unadulterated as we would like it to be? Because it seems that seems to be a common consensus with everybody. So what are we doing?
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Amah. And of course, Ayajay, thank you so much. Then let's have Juwon. Juwon, you want to say something again?
Yeah, so can you hear me very well? Because where I am, there's a
Yes.
little bit of echo somewhere. Okay,
Yes, I
thank
can
you
hear
very
you.
much. Oh, glad. So it's a lot that has been said here, and I also just want to give a comment, not really a question, based on some of the things you've said. So first of all, I don't think to answer Dr. Miracle's question in part, not wholly, because there are different sides to all these things. There are different dynamics to it. With the music that we have today that represents, African music, that represents Yoruba music or any other music, there is no music you would call like, oh, this is like the traditional. If you want to experience traditional Yoruba music, maybe the music used in accompanying religious rites, maybe those ones will qualify. Even all the Apala that doesn't have Western instruments, that are basically percussion and harmonized vocals, they are still not, pristinely Yoruba music. They are influenced, do you understand, in some ways. So to say, and also one other thing is that this matter is not, I think we are viewing it to an extent in a very linear, it's a linear approach. Oh, let's start from there, then we take it on and on. It's a very like rhizomatic discussion where you can start your own thing from anywhere. It doesn't have to be like, oh, we have to like change the curriculum, then we move on, then we do this. Then it's a very diverse space. And one thing we should also know that unlike maybe every other space or like every other humanist engagement, music is a very practical thing. And people approach it just the way they want to approach it. And, so far, the way I compose music doesn't cause World War III. You understand? It doesn't kill anybody. I can do whatever I like with it. If I like, I use just one Yoruba word and everything. It's fine. You understand? Everyone will do what they want to do. And everyone will identify the way they want to identify. As an Afropolitanist, as a traditionalist, as African popular music or anything. But one thing I feel like is important, which for me is one of the reasons why I came to like say I want to do my PhD, is the issue of how I discuss what I'm doing, idea of representation, which Mr. Dr. Ayorinde rightly said. We do all these practical things. And sometimes when you call musicians to come and explain, to talk about it, you'll be disappointed, like, yeah, it makes sense. I love your music, but to the point where you start talking about it, I'm lost in some ways. And it's an ever evolving, thing, idea of representing what we are doing. So that we don't represent things and it feels like what we are talking and what we are saying and what we are doing are somehow in contrast and they are not like complementing each other very well. So I think that's all I want to add to this discussion. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Duan. Thank you so much. Well, it's an interesting conversation, and I'm happy that we are approaching it in different, from different perspectives, and that's why it's so important for us to have this kind of conversation. So, I think let's have Mr. Gani Kale, then we have Dr. Laura T. Yeah.
I think I just want to point everybody to what I think Dr. Mojola posted on the group chat. And that's what we've been talking about, is that we need to fix our roots back home. And I think everybody should read that comment because it's good.
Mr. Kolawale, are you still there?
Yeah, I am here indeed.
Okay.
Yes, I wanted to respond to the last but one caller who was talking about recovering and discovering the originality of African sound. Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the strategies for this recovery and discovery is already within our grasp, and all we need to do is to identify and utilize them. For instance, in modern Afropop genre like Juju and Fuji and others, it requires a deep dive into the historical and cultural as well as musical roots of this genre to do this. We have a lot of rich musical forms that have evolved significantly over time, even if they use Western instruments. At least from my understanding of Juju, the application of Western instruments cannot really be described as Western as such. If we listen critically to how this instrument like the guitar is being employed, it blends traditional African rhythm and sound with excellent influences. Where I think if we find a way of studying and understanding the indigenous rhythm, for Juju, the original sound is closely tied to instruments like the talking drum, the dudung, the bata, the shekere that he mentioned, that the agidigbo and the rest of them. Actually, early Juju music emphasized the call and response patterns that are typical of traditional African oral performance. And for Fuji, the genre derived from from the tradition which is of Muslim praise singing, which is used during Ramadan and the rest of them, which we all know. But that is not my summary here is that recovering the originality of African sound is in modern Afropop genres, and it requires a conscious effort to reconnect it with indigenous roots, with musical, cultural, and spiritual. It involves a blend of research into traditional instruments and rhythms, preservation of indigenous usage of oral tradition, and a careful, respectful balance between modernity and tradition. So, by paying homage to the traditional performance practice, the communal aspect and acoustic sound of pre-colonial African music, today's artists can ensure that the African essence remains vibrant and integral within evolving Afropop sounds. I don't know if I address this properly. I just want to respond to that question. It's not like we have lost our originality. of our sonic sonic culture within our tradition, especially in the Yoruba tradition. This is everywhere. If we don't go into the villages, into the hinterlands, it is still with us right here, even with all the modern technology and development that we have. These uh, sonic elements are alive and real, and it is staring us in the face constantly, irrespective of the way it has transformed. We can still find this root, this identity in what we have in our fingertips in today's day and age. So that's what I want to contribute.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Kolawole. Thank you. Can we have Dr. Ayorinde then? Let's see how we need to wrap up now, as we've actually traveled so far on this important, train of the day.
Okay. Miracle said earlier on that if you're talking about this African music, what exactly is it? What are we talking about? All this noise we're making, right? And I note in Joshua David's message to everyone, he says, how do we define pre-colonial Africa? What is the reference point for this imagined space? Imagined space. Let's get it right. It's not an imagined space. If you look for the information, you will get the information. If you research, you will get this information. We existed in Africa before colonialism. We had our way of life. We have our music. Maybe we have not been able to canonize things, theorize things. When you look at the history of Western music, you can look at the Renaissance, the medieval, how everything dovetailed into the Baroque period. We can see all those connections. Yes, I agree that we have been unable to do that with African music. But the most important thing is that we have a lot of recordings documented. We have a lot of archives that documented music before the colonial era. And it's just going to take a lot of analytical and theoretical insights you see, it was at a conference, I think in 2021, when Professor Agawu said at a summit of African art music thinkers, he said the music of pre-colonial Africa in terms of pitch was purely modal, and it took me back. He spoke from the perspective of a music analyst. Then I started going back to a lot of recordings pre-colonial Africa, and I discovered that connection in terms of pitch organization. Akinyuba would say that pre-colonial music in Africa had a lot to do with pitch centricity. And you see, I just connected it. Pitch centricity. And then this issue of it's a modal system has a lot to do with pitch centricity. Different from tonal music. So these are the things that defined theoretically. But it's difficult because you will not find one source or two sources or three sources or four sources that document pre-colonial Africa in terms of music and lay these things down. But then those things are there if you look for them. That's the truth. I didn't confess to miracle. When we worked on the project together on Agbedolori, a lot of the music that didn't do with popular music, everything was rooted in the principles of music in pre-colonial Africa. Every single thing. I just hope that somebody will pick up that opera one day and get into that level and understand it. That when we say, okay, this is an attempt at an African opera, it's not just because it's written by an African man or performed by an African woman, but because of the theoretical components which occurred on the landscape before pre-colonial Africa. So this issue of, is it an imagined space? It's not an imagined space. Thank you very much.
And I think to
Thank
further
you
buttress what
so much. Okay.
Ayorinde said is that I think what you just said, sir, is what we need to be teaching in our schools. Because I don't think, I would say 90% of people, even right now in Nigeria, that are studying music, know these analytics that you're talking about with the music. So if we ourselves, only a few people can identify these things, how are we going to make the change to make other people understand what we see in the music that brings us back to pre-colonial music? So I think these are the things that we need to emphasize in schools. We need to emphasize in theory classes instead of the 145 harmonize the chord, figured bass. Let's start analyzing these things too in our classes and start changing these spaces in our environment. Then it can spread to the diaspora. That's that's my take on that.
Thank you so much. We have Mr. Adeyemi. Can you make it briefly, Mr. Adeyemi? I think Mr. Joshua has actually addressed his point. Mr. Adeyemi, can you make it briefly?
Yes, please. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm very happy that you have given me the opportunity to speak because I know you're already rounding up this session. So I will be as brief as possible. Mine is going to be a challenge. You see, it's always disheartening to have ourselves talking about going back to the roots when we are not even practicing what is close to the roots.
Yeah,
I want to throw a challenge. What I want to do this afternoon is I want to challenge everyone on this loop. But let me start by challenging Dr. Miracle. With me, I have two musical instruments, and I want her to identify the two. I'm not sure. Well, maybe I should show my face so that when you see me next time, you can.
Show your face so we can.
Oh, okay, sorry. Just give me a minute. This is going to be okay. Now, I'm in the comfort of my home, just like you're somewhere too. You can't talk about going back to the roots when you are not in Nigeria, like Professor Ayo challenged you to come back to Nigeria. But I need you to know something. We are all planning to come to your side. The reason being that we want our economic situation to change. So while coming back, make sure you come back with enough booties so that you will not be discouraged.
Dr. Lawrence is laughing.
Now, I have two musical instruments with me right now. And so I want you to, I will give you 5 tests and it will be very brief.
I'm about to fail this test, but okay.
Which musical instrument is that, please?
I don't think anybody heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'll play it again.
Are you sharing your sound?
I think you might, yes, that's what I was going to say. You might need to share your sound or even use a microphone that's targeted on that instrument to really produce the sound that we can all hear it.
No, sorry. Can you hear my voice?
We can hear your voice clearly. We just
Okay, I
can't hear
think the
the
point
sound that
is
you're trying to
we can
create.
hear your voice, but we can't hear your sound because it's not here. We can't hear your voice.
Okay, so we can't hear your voice because you don't have original sound turned on. If you have original sound turned on, it would work. Zoom sees everything else apart from your voice as background noise, so it's going to cut them off.
Okay, how do I do that briefly, please?
Audio setting, original sound on.
Oh, do I go to settings first?
Audio setting, original sound on.
Can someone
Okay.
text that on the group chat so we can take someone else while he's fixing that, so that we
Okay,
don't.
I think we need to close this session. But
No,
perhaps,
sorry.
I don't know, we need to have...
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so what about this sound? Can you hear this? Can you hear that?
No.
No.
Unfortunately, I don't know.
Sorry.
Perhaps we need to...
Okay,
Do you
so
know what, Mr.
please.
Adeyemi?
Yes,
We
sir.
might need to do a follow-up, then you just get ready with the sound and everything. Because we are already out of... we have
Yes.
exceeded...
I think you can also record it and send it through
Yes.
send it through the platform or through Mr. Oladele, and then I will receive it and give you my feedback.
Well, I'm sorry that I could not challenge everybody this evening because
That's
it would have
okay.
been a joy
There
for
are
me.
many more. These conversations are never ending, and there will
Definitely.
be many more opportunities for you to do that.
So, okay, let me just round up, please. So, one thing is this: it is easy to talk about going back to the root, but you see, going back to the root has a lot of things attached to it. You see, there are a lot of things that is a causal effect of we going away from the root, and one of those things is your religion. Let me ask you, please. What's your religion? I'm directing my question to Dr. Miracle because she's the speaker.
I'm Christian.
Yes. So can you go back to worshiping of Ifa?
Absolutely not.
Great. So if it is not, if you are saying here that you can't go back to that, then it will be difficult for you to address this issue of going back to the root, because you can't go back to the root without identifying with other figures, without identifying with things that are original to that root. And one of
So
the things
let me
that are
answer that
original-
quickly. Let me answer that quickly.
Sorry,
We can
please. Wait.
understand.
I don't want you to contest me, please. One of the things that helps you to go back to your root is your religion. That is
I don't
one
agree
of
with
the
that.
yes, look, that is one of the major storage. I know Professor Ayorinde will be able to say something about this. That is the major storage of the originality of any African music. And so
If you
if
do
you
not
are
agree
not
with that,
able to go back to it, you may not be able to record the original music of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The conversation continues, definitely. The conversation continues, and we are definitely
and thank you, Ayajayi, for responding to that. And that's what I was going to say.
indeed
Just
another kind of
because I
work.
don't want to go back
Indeed,
to the
yeah.
ritual of worship does not mean I cannot understand the tradition behind it. So that's all I wanted to say. But yes, that's a whole topic on its own. Yes, another kind of one, Mr. Kolawole. So that's another topic for another day. But these are all very exciting conversations. And as much as I believe in talking about it, I believe more in action. So as much as we are talking about it, let's start fixing our home. Let's start fixing the educational system, the expectations of musical education in Nigeria. And then we can start talking about diaspora and talking about what the change truly is, or what we're expecting for that change.
Wow. Dear all, thank you so much for this interesting engagement. Dr. Amah, thank you so much. Thank you for your fascinating perspective and insightful responses. Thank you so much. It's been an interesting journey with you today. I'm sure most of our friends online will agree with me. This has been a productive, conversation so far. Thank you so much. We really
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time, and we really appreciate your, insights and knowledge, and your trajectory so far is quite proof says it all. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. So
Thank
to
you.
our colleagues and friends online, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an interesting journey. But don't forget, I'm going to put the link again on the chat. Follow us on the, follow us, on the link at our YouTube page, and see how you can, make use of the resources. Is there for everyone to make use of. Please follow us, and let's see how, you are engaging. And we are happy to also, this recording, we also go to that same space and across our social media pages for, for further engagement, definitely. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Thanks to Dr. Agatha Olan, Dr. Lurati, who else again?
Dr. Mojola.
Dr. Mojola. Okay. I'm not, is he here?
I think he's DBO. If I'm
Okay,
if I'm
DBO.
getting that
Okay, definitely
correctly.
DBO is is an insider. Yeah. Then
Oh,
Dr. Tuloke Waje, who is again? Shobanke Samuel, Mel Music. Who is Joshua? Nesoma, thank you so much. It's nice seeing you. Ogbani, thank you so much. It's nice seeing you today. Then Shonwakin Ajayi, thank you for joining us. Then who else is here? Mr.
Ayo
Gani
Ajayi.
Kale, of course, thank you so much. Mr. Adeyemi, thank you. God's gift, thank you. Mr. Joshua, thank you so much for your time, for the engagement, and all the, the usual, thank you so much. We appreciate you, everyone. So next week is another day. We are going to have a different engagement, moving in different direction next week. Please join us next week as we come up with a different approach to this whole thing, with layers of performance, layers of stuff here and there. But look out for the update and the posters. Thank you so much. It's been an interesting moment today. Dr. Amah, thank you so much. Definitely,
Thank
we
you.
are going to have a follow-up on this. We can't finish this conversation once. It's
Oh.
not possible. It's not possible. We can't finish out on the go. We need to come back again. Definitely, I will reach out to you. In fact, perhaps next one we need to bring collectives together, bring in those concerned. They know themselves on
I
this
think
platform
that's a good
today.
idea.
Dr. Oland, Dr. Amah, Joshua, David, and those in that the realm of opera and opera world. Definitely expect our invitation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Amah. We appreciate you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, everyone,
Okay.
see you next week. Bye for now.